Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we have a special show for you this week, the Ducks and Pumpkins show, Eddie. It's Halloween week, so get ready for Ducks and Pumpkins, all right? So that's what we're going to be doing this week. We're going to be going over the road trip. The Ducks did very well, won 3 out of 4 games. Actually, what you and I predicted, not quite the order of the games that we thought would happen. We'll go into that and how they did. We'll talk about some injury news with some of the players, fan questions as well, and of course we'll look forward to the Ducks' upcoming homestand, so we'll talk about that. So, Eddie, going back to the road trip here, the Ducks left the safe confines of Anaheim and they flew out to Philly. And, we looked at these games. We thought the Ducks would win this one against the Flyers here, and they actually did. They did a good job in this game. They took them out, 6-2, but it was, basically a blowout. It started out with Philly scoring first in the opening period, and then Kassé scored, and then the Ducks took over in the second with 3 goals. And they carried that momentum in the third, and they ended up winning this one, blowing them out 6-2, Eddie.
Yeah, it was a great performance, really. I mean, they rebounded from a slow start with Couturier getting the first goal of the game for the Flyers, and then, they scored 5 goals straight right after that. And then, when Couturier scores the second time, it really doesn't matter. The Ducks are up 5-2, and then Kasha gets the I guess it's the icing on the cake with a 6-2 goal. I mean, doesn't really mean much at that point, but yeah, they're getting goals from all of the lineup in this game. Casa got 2, Richie had 1, Raquel and Getzlaf had goals, and then Montour, who's been unbelievable lately. He had a great 4 games this week, and he got his 3rd of the season in this game. So it was a really solid performance, and we talked about it when we previewed this game last week, how the Ducks are going up against a familiar foe in Brian Elliott, who they lit up in the playoffs when they were playing Calgary last year, and they did the same thing to him in this game, and it was just it was a great performance, a good way to start the road trip, and it bode well for the rest of the games.
Yeah, absolutely, and in this one, starting off the road trip, getting the win, that was huge, as we talked about. The Ducks also got a power play goal. And they actually, it's kind of a theme on this road trip. They ended up scoring some more on the power play. Obviously, it's still ranked pretty low in the league, but to see that coming around is a good sight as well. And this always kind of happens, it seems, Eddie, is you and I kind of semi call out some players, and those players kind of show up. And we talked about Raquel, Perry, and Getzlaf. They all ended up playing together, and they pretty much were the top scoring line in this game. Getting 3 goals out there, 5 total points. It just seems funny whenever we mention certain players' names. I don't know if they're sitting at home listening or what, but then they turn it on usually the next game or two.
Yeah, right after pretty much, the main thing we said was that Getzlaf, when he comes back, we didn't really harp too much on Getzlaf because he had been out, but we said he's the leader, he's got to come back, and he's got to play well, and of course he gets a goal and an assist in this game, but specifically Perry and Raquel have to step up because they weren't when Getzlaf was out of the lineup, and we saw a lot of guys like Vermette and Grant and Kasha getting all the goals, and they played great in this game. Perry had 2 assists, Raquel had a goal, and they really drove the play. And then one other thing we mentioned as well is guys like Kasha, guys like Richie and Grant as well are going to have to continue to play well. And Kasha had 2 goals in this game. Richie had 1. Grant had an assist in this game. So the bottom 6 continues to score goals as well. And that's what you get, and you end up getting a 6-2 game.
Yeah, if the bottom half keeps scoring, which we got a fan question about that, we'll get to a little bit later, then that's going to be huge for Anaheim. The other part of this game that we cannot forget is the Bieksa Superman punch, Eddie, where he freaking lays the smackdown, 1 punch in that fight that he had, and I guess we posted the video and everybody went nuts over that, of course, but the downside, Eddie, is that he hurt his hand. And ironically, it wasn't the hand that he punched Gudice with. It was the hand, which we kind of thought it was, once they announced it wasn't the punching hand. But it was still the same incident. but it was his left hand. So that when he landed awkwardly after clocking him, basically, that's what ended up happening. And there's still no update, unfortunately. There's supposed to be one the beginning of this week. We haven't heard he got reevaluated, but that was pretty crazy. And he's done that before, Eddie. Some people didn't realize that he's knocked out people with one punch before. So this isn't new for Bieksa.
No, and I mean it wasn't an easy fight either. He was fighting a pretty tough guy in Radko Gudas, and just got the jump on him and for lack of a better term, he one punched him. And I mean it was a really good move by Bieksa, and unfortunately, like you said, he ends up hurting not his punching hand, but his left hand, which he ends up falling on awkwardly. And the injuries continue to pile up for the Ducks. Obviously, this isn't a key injury like we've been seeing lately, but it still is another injury to the blue line. And obviously, that was offset by guys like Lindholm and Vatanen coming back this week. So that helps a bit. But the injuries, as weird as they are, sometimes continue to pile up for the Ducks.
Yeah, exactly. And, it'll be a theme we'll talk about in some of the other, the other games coming up. But, one thing with Bieksa, too, is I think more and more fans are warming up to him, after the whole thing with Shaw and the game on the homestand, then this, because before a lot of people were like, Bieksa this and Bieksa that, because, the turnovers and whatnot he was doing, especially earlier, in the season last year. A lot of people are upset, but now he seems to be a little bit more of a fan favorite, I would say, Eddie, with all the roughhousing he's been doing and kicking some serious, what.
Yeah, I mean he's been better than he was last year. I haven't noticed as many errors as he had last year. I mean he's still, when everybody's healthy, he's still the Ducks' worst defenseman. When you've got guys like Fowler, Lindholm, Vatanen, Manson, Montour in front of you, he does play his role well. It's unfortunate that he ended up getting hurt doing so. But, I think the issue with a lot of people still is the amount of money we're paying him to do just that. I think that's the main issue that a lot of people have with it. I think if he was getting paid, 1.5, it would be fine. He can go out and fight. We could get a couple of big hits, and we'd be fine because we're only paying him $1.5 million. But when you're paying a guy $4.5 million, you're expecting him to do a little bit more, and he hasn't been awful this season, but I think that's where a lot of people are stuck on it, and I'm one of the people included in that group. Is I think that's the hard part for many people to get over, is the fact that the Ducks are still paying him that much money.
Right, and like you said, he's not a speedster. He still does make mistakes here and there, so that's definitely part of the issue when it comes down to money. You're like, hey, we're paying this guy this much. Yeah, he's kicking people's butts or whatever, but you want a little bit more for $4 million a year. So, but anyways, the Ducks start off the road trip good, and then they ran into Florida, another team that we thought that the Ducks would have a good game against, that they'd possibly win, but instead they get smoked in this game. Verbata gets a hat trick. They drop 8 goals on the Ducks, Eddie, and this was just a hard one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming off such a good game against Philadelphia. This is one of the games last week that we thought they would have a good chance of winning. Really the only thing going for Florida right now was their top line, Barkov, Huberdeau, and Dadonov. They had really started to click and gain some chemistry, and of course they were the best line in this game. And nothing seemed to go right for the Ducks in this game. If you look at the stat line and just exclude the score, I don't think you would think it would have been 8-3 for the Panthers. I mean, the Ducks outshot the Panthers 34-22. They dominated the faceoff dot. They had 62% of the draws won. Not much going on in the power play. Florida was 1 for 3. Ducks were 0 for 3. And then after that, there wasn't any tells that the game would have been that bad. But it seemed like every shot that Florida put on net, either got a lucky bounce or it just went into the back of the net. And it's one of those games you just got to forget about. And I think the only bright spot for the Ducks in this game was that Kalle Casilla got his first goal of his NHL career. Other than that, this is one you got to put behind you.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, it was a hard one to watch. Gibson only went through the first 2 periods, gave up 6 goals on 17 shots. Berra came in, didn't do much better. He gave up 2 goals on 5 shots. The defense just wasn't there. The offense as well, they really couldn't get anything going. They did get a couple goals in the third period, but then they gave up a couple more goals. I mean, it just, I don't know. This was one like Randy Carlisle said, you just flush it. He said it's difficult to do that, but it's going to happen once in a while. So you can't get too upset about it. I mean, obviously you don't want to have that repeat again, especially if you're playing a good team. And that's what happened. We thought that they would win this game, Eddie. They lost it in a bad way, and then they went to play Tampa. Tampa, we thought, was going to be the game that they were lose, and instead they win that game, Eddie. So, I mean, it kind of flip-flopped here. Like we said, we thought they would get points in 3 of the 4 games. They did, but these 2 games were kind of a switch of what we anticipated. But you got to be happy. They played terrible against Florida, and then they came out and they beat Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and they did exactly what they should have done. They put that game in the back burner, and they come into this game and they turn it on. And they played a very, very strong game against a team who was on fire to start the season, and especially against their 2 best players who had point streaks since the beginning of the season. Stamkos and Kucherov had 11-game point streaks going into this game, and then the only player to score for the Lightning in this game was Chris Kunitz. So just a great performance all around. They didn't put a ton of shots on net, but they took advantage of the 2 power plays they had finally. Yeah, all really led by Brandon Montour, who's turned it on this week. He had an assist on the Raquel power play goal to start the game, and then he had his own bomb where he put the Ducks up 2-0. So just a great performance. It's nice to see the power play get going, and for the Ducks to have a strong performance against a very good team coming off such a bad loss. It's encouraging to see.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was a little bit surprised. After that Florida game, I was thinking, oh man, now we're playing Tampa Bay, the team with the best record. Not gonna lie, I was looking at this game going, because they were 9-1-1. Tampa Bay hadn't lost a game at home. I mean, so for the Ducks to come in there and take them out, and I mean, it was a solid win. 4-1 too as well. It was good. I mean, Budaj did go in net for them, and didn't do as well maybe. If they had gone with Oleski, but I mean, it is what it is. He played in the game, and Ducks were able to take advantage. The power play starting to come to life a little bit here on the road trip. They had 3 power play goals now. 3 games. They didn't have one in the last game against Florida, but they had them here, and then the game against Philly. So saw the power play unit starting to work. The Ducks did get Sami Vatanen back for this game. He was able to play just over 17 minutes, so that was good as well. So overall, a really good performance, Eddie. And it was the start of back-to-back, so it's good to get this win before they headed into Carolina.
Yeah, and I think they really took advantage of their chances in the game. You mentioned that Budaj was in, but I think the goals they scored were for, it's hard to say, but they were pretty much unstoppable. Even if Vasilevsky was in net, I think nobody was stopping Montour's shot. Perry was blocking out the sun in front of the net. Lindholm's goal squeaks in with 0.1 seconds left. And then Raquel was wide open in the slot, and Getzlaf found him, of course, and it was a one-timer, easy one to the back of the net. So it's just a great performance. And again, we talked about how these guys have to step up, and Getzlaf has 3 assists in this game. Perry grabs an assist, Raquel grabs 2 goals in this game, and Montour continues to produce from the blue line. So the big guys are stepping up at key times.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goal by Lindholm, when that first happened, I didn't think it was going to count. I mean, I saw the 000s up there, and I was like, I don't think so. And then you look on the replay, and man, it just got across the line. I mean, with only 0.1 second left, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to see that, But I mean, I'm glad it worked out. And that was kind of a big momentum goal because Kunitz had scored just 2 minutes before that and made it, a 2-1 game. Now the Ducks carried a 3-1 lead into the third period. So big play, and like you said, all the players that needed to step up have been stepping up lately.
Yeah, and really for Lindholm too, it's been a very good start for the first 4 games for him coming back from injury. He has 3 points in 4 games, and of course, his defensive play has been one of the best on the team, and that's really what we know him for. But it's nice for him to pick up the offense as well and start so strongly. And picking up 3 points in 4 games is no slump. And hopefully, he can continue to do that. Montour continue to contribute offensively. And once Vatanen is 100% healthy, we can expect to see him on either the first power play unit or the second power play unit, and getting some points there as well.
So the Ducks then, after that win, they had to play Carolina back-to-back situation, and we saw Ryan Miller get activated off the IR, and he actually started in this game and played this one, and he actually won it for the Ducks in a shootout. This was kind of a crazy game because the Ducks looked good early. Kase and Grant both scored. The Ducks built a 2-0 lead. Carolina got a late goal at the end of the first period, and then it was really the second period where they put on the pressure and they ended up taking the lead. And it looked like maybe Carolina was going to win this game. They were up 3-2 for pretty much the rest of the game until a little over 4 minutes left. Silverberg finally gets a goal. Hopefully he can start getting things going, but he forces the overtime. Nobody scores there. We go to a shootout, and we always hope to get to a shootout because we know how we do in the overtime. So with that, nobody scored except for Corey Perry, and the Ducks pulled out 2 points in this one, Eddie. So they ended up getting 6 points, out of a possible 8, like we had anticipated.
Yeah, and the momentum really shifted back and forth. I think it has something to do with tired legs for sure, but the Ducks started out very strong, obviously getting a goal from Kasha and Grant early on. Unfortunately, Skinner gets one with 6.6 seconds left, and that really carried momentum over for the Hurricanes in the second period, where the Ducks just got dominated. It was a poor period by them. They get out, unfortunately, down by 1 goal. And then the script flips again, and then the Ducks have a very strong third period. Luckily, Silverberg finally gets his first goal of the season, and he's starting to turn things around as well. And then from there, it was the Miller show. The Ducks were horrible in overtime, outshot 9-1. And I think Miller stopped at least 3 or 4 clear-cut breakaways, and it was just unbelievable. And then, like you said, in the shootout as well, he made some key saves and really pulled the win for the Ducks. And, they probably didn't really deserve this win, but again, they get a stellar performance in net, and they get 2 points.
Yeah, we've seen that before. We've seen that where they played games where they do well in the first period, not so well in the second period, and then better in the third. I don't know why, but the Ducks seem to do that, here and there. Remember a couple of seasons ago where they just had those terrible second periods, and it looks like the overtimes are still kind of hanging out there too. Like you said, getting outshot 9-1 was just ridiculous, and it was a game where with Silverberg scoring, you were happy just to get a point in this game, and then with Miller saving the show, he saved 34 out of 37 shots in the game plus the overtime. Then of course he stopped everything in the shootout. Clearly the first star of the game in this one. That's huge, and that's great. To see him come in finally. Get another player back from injury. He comes in his first game as a Duck, and he does what he's supposed to do. And the crazy thing is he leads the league in shutout wins, Eddie, at 58. That's just a crazy stat. So that's why I tweeted out that we want him in there. As a shootout. It doesn't matter if Gibson starts or he starts. When we get to shootout, we're just going to put in Miller. Forget it. That's it. We're just going to put him in.
We just pop him in overtime, too. And
yeah.
Maybe he can just save the day. He seems pretty comfortable on breakaways, something that we've harped on for Gibson, it's pretty much since he began his career in Anaheim. So we might as well just throw Gibby and, throw Miller in every OT and shootout, and maybe we'll get a couple more wins.
Yeah, maybe we'll always get that extra point. So Botman, didn't play in this game. Some people I know were asking about him. They were concerned. He just came back in the Tampa Bay game, so they didn't feel he was really conditioned ready, to go back to back. That's the only reason why he sat out. So he wasn't injured. That was the good news. I know some people were a little bit stressed over why he was not playing, but of course another injury happens, Eddie, which I don't know. I'm just at a loss for words for all this. So in this game, Getzlaf gets a puck in the face. He goes out, comes back, and then goes out of the game and doesn't come back. There's no update on him either, which is kind of frustrating. But, it looks like he had at least some kind of bruising going on in the face. We don't know the extent. Not really sure what his status is coming up here on the home stand. But it's just another thing that's just annoying, Eddie, to see another player with an injury.
Especially the way he's been playing too. Every game he's been in, he's pretty much been an impact. He's got 7 points in the 6 games so far that he's played in. Arguably the Ducks, biggest key player, and to have him out of the lineup again and not know his status is certainly frustrating. But I hope it's not that bad. The fact that he came back in after initially getting hit in the face. It's sort of promising. Again, obviously he missed the second and third period and didn't come back and play. And And whether that was precaution or whatever, or the fact that it was actually serious, we just don't know yet. I can only assume that maybe it swelled up, and they had to attend to that, and there was no way he can come back and play. And hopefully that's the case, which would mean that he would likely be able to play in the game against Toronto coming up. But hopefully we hear more tomorrow when during practice, and we get some updates on him and Bieksa.
Yeah, that's what we'd hope. With the injuries going around right now, maybe we'll find out some news before Wednesday's game against Toronto. But right now, Getzlaf and Bieksa are kind of up in the air. As far as other players, there was some good news on the Patrick Eaves front here. He actually ended up getting out of the hospital. He was at Hoag Hospital, and he's back home. So that's a good sign for him. We still don't know when he's going to come back, if it's even going to be this season. Unfortunately, this whole disease thing that's going on where his immune system attacks the nervous system, it's just some crazy thing that we're trying to deal with and see, how he can get through it. So that status is up in the air. The Ducks did put him on the long-term injury reserve. So, at that point, Eddie, we do know he's going to be gone for a little while. And that's where we're at. And if you look at cap friendly, the Ducks do have about $5 million in cap space now. So, we talked about this on the show last week. We had another question about the Ducks making a trade. We had Lone ask us, do you think the Ducks will do that right now? And what do you think, Eddie? I mean, we discussed this last week. We're kind of on the fence. Maybe some options out there. I mean, it's early in the season. Doesn't usually happen. Is there anything that you think, the Ducks would try and do now that they've made the move and put him on the LTIR?
Well, last week we mentioned Galchenyuk, and I think that was really it. That was the whole discussion around trades and whether that would happen or not. And the big issue for us was that they had no cap space, and we speculated that either Fowler, possibly Eaves, would go on the long-term injured reserve. And again, we find out Eaves goes on it, and now the Ducks have about $5 million in cap space. And up until this morning, there was another guy that I would have mentioned as a possible target for the Ducks, and that was Shibachev with the Vegas Golden Knights. But now that whole situation has unfolded, and it looks like he is going to go back to Russia instead. So there really isn't many updates as for trades for the Ducks. I still don't think they make a move now. I think it really comes. They probably wait until Kessler's ready to come back, and then if anything, see how Eaves' status goes with what he's dealing with right now. And if they need to make a move, then it probably comes at the deadline, because if Eaves isn't ready to go, then they still have that $5 million in cap space, which they can use towards deal at the deadline, where a lot more players will be available. Guys like James Neal, if Vegas cools down, and at least some other guys who the Ducks could add potentially to bolster their roster. So I don't think anything really comes in the meantime. I think more of the action will be closer to the trade deadline when guys like Kessler and Fowler are back in the lineup.
Yeah, and part of the issue too that a lot of people have been asking us about is if he's on the LTIR and the Ducks have that space, they can go get somebody. Well, yeah, they can, but you got to remember, if Eaves comes back, then the Ducks, they're going to be over. It's a catch-22. They have to do something. They can't just go get another player, because that space only exists right now. And if he's able to come back sooner than later, then the Ducks won't have to do that. So unfortunately, it's a waiting game, really, essentially. And that's, what the Ducks are. I agree with you. I think they're just going to kind of hang out right now, because we just don't know the extent of Eaves' absence is going to be. Obviously, him going back home is great. He's not in the hospital anymore, but as far as where they go from there, we don't really know 100%. So I don't see the Ducks doing anything either. As far as making any moves or anything like that. The other reason, too, is because we got news that Fowler is going to be coming back. They said it's 4 to 8 weeks that he's out, going back to October 20th. So hopefully we see him maybe in mid-November or maybe later towards Thanksgiving time, somewhere in there. But now that we know that he's not going to have surgery, he's not going to be gone for a long time, he's not going to be put on the LTIR. So that's a good sign. I mean, it's not good that he's going to be out for that period of time, but at least we know we are eventually getting him back, Eddie. So that's kind of where we're at with the injuries. And I think, like you said, I think the Ducks are just going to kind of sit where they're at. I mean, we've seen the bottom six are playing well. Raquel, Perry, and Getzlaf are playing well. Hopefully Getzlaf is going to be back, and the Ducks go from there.
Yeah, and one thing you have to look at too with any trade is, you can't just look at this season for the Ducks as well. You have to look into next season, and if they bring any contracts that are more than 1 year, specifically if we look at Galchenyuk, who's I believe he has a contract for this year and next year. There's not a lot of wiggle room in cap for the Ducks. Yes, they do lose BX's contract at the end of this season, but also Fowler begins his new contract, which is at 6.5. So they lose BX's 4, but then they gain another 2.5. They end up losing Boschman, who's $1 million, but then you also have to re-sign Brandon Montour at the end of this season, which he's going to get a raise. Maybe not a significant raise, probably a bridge deal, but most likely around $2 or $3 million, which is more than he's making now. And then you also have to look at guys like Cogliano, who's due for a new contract. Nick Ritchie's due for a contract. Andre Cash is due for a contract. So it's very difficult for the Ducks to bring on a multi-year contract right now. And that's why, I don't really see a trade for a guy like Galchenyuk or a guy with a multi-year contract being done. And more so, the Ducks look to the deadline and look for more of a rental. So for one, they don't have to pay as much. And two, it doesn't affect them coming into next season.
Yeah, and once we get to that time, when it comes towards the trade deadline and whatnot, we'll have, things can change. Obviously, with this team, you all listening out there know it seems like every day something changes because somebody's getting hurt, somebody's coming back. I mean, we have no idea how it's going to be come February. So just have to, wait and see on this one, unfortunately. And that's what I think they're going to do. The only other moves that the Ducks did do during this week is they sent Oleski and Casilla back down to San Diego. So they're down there with the Gulls. That's really it as far as injuries and movement right now. If something else comes up, we'll find out with BX and Getzlaf later in this week. With that, we'll turn, we've got a lot of fan questions, Eddie, this week. Dealing with all kinds of different subjects. We have Darren and Jimmy. They both ask about the playoffs. They talk about the third line, the fourth line doing well, which you and I have mentioned. Miller coming back and playing well. And how do we think the Ducks are going to do in the playoffs? Or at least, are they going to make the playoffs? And we talked about this on the show last week, if you didn't catch it. But we're still of the mindset that the Ducks are going to make the playoffs. We don't think that they'll probably end up in first. I mean, obviously, the Kings have been lighting it up, and so is Vegas. Things can change and whatnot, but we also don't care. I mean, we just want to make the playoffs. Broken record. They've won the division so many times. I know we go to the games, you see all those division banners, and it's like, that's nice, but we want the big banner.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had this question pretty much every week, I think, and each week we kind of have a variation on the same answer, and it's pretty much that it's almost too early. The Kings are 9-2-1 with their loss tonight. Vegas is 8-2-0 with their loss tonight. The Vancouver Canucks are sitting third right now at 6-3-1, and two of those teams I don't see being here in a month or 2 months from now. And another team you have to look at that's the complete opposite is the Oilers, a team that you and me and pretty much everybody thought would be challenging for the top of the Pacific Division, is sitting 3-6-1 just above the Arizona Coyotes in the bottom. And that's a team who, once they can turn things around, are going to compete for the Pacific Division title. So it's very hard to look at what we have right now and predict if the Ducks are going to win the Pacific Division title, if they're going to finish first, second, third, wild card. I think they have a good enough team with everybody healthy to make the playoffs. I don't know about winning the division yet. They could add some guys at the deadline that could change my mind, but I definitely think they're still a playoff team.
Absolutely, and I think that we talked about this, but it leads into our next question too from Danilo. He asks about the bottom six and can they keep delivering? And I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, the way that they've been going, we've seen Wagner, Rasmussen, we've seen Grant now, Kassé scoring. You see all these guys are starting to contribute, no matter how they're rearranged in the bottom six. And I think that's going to be a key for the Ducks to go to the playoffs, especially with the way the injuries are going. Because, like we said, we don't know how long Eves is going to be out. We hope Getzlaf's not out again. But, with all this shifting of the lineup, the bottom six have actually been more of the consistent groups right now. Now the top six is coming along. Like we talked about, Raquel, Perry, and Getzlaf have been coming around these last several games. But I think it's huge. I think they will continue to produce. It seems like there's some good chemistry on those lines, Eddie. And it's been huge for the Ducks to win these games and, be at 6-4-1 right now.
Yeah, and it's not even just guys stepping up that we thought would step up. At the beginning of the season when we previewed this roster, we said, Cash is going to have to take a step forward, and he has. And Richie's got to take a step forward, which maybe arguably he hasn't. But it's more the guys that are surprising. I mean, Derek Grant having 5 points in 11 games, that's a surprise. Wagner having 6 points in 11 games is a surprise for sure. And I think those are a reason why the Ducks are 6-4-1 right now and are in a good position, because we've seen games where Raquel, Perry, Getzlaf haven't really been a factor. The Ducks have still won the game because guys like Vermette and Wagner and Kasha and Grant have come through and really driven the offense for the Ducks, and that's something we didn't expect and has been a pleasant surprise. And if that can continue, and when you get guys like Getzlaf and Raquel and Perry going like they are now, when you get a guy like Ryan Kessler back, when you get Fowler back and everybody's healthy, if they're still continuing to produce, this is going to be a very difficult team to play against if they have 4 lines who can score.
Yeah, and that's going to be huge for this team. If they can roll 4 lines and then stay healthy, look out. This team's going to be dangerous. We saw they're scoring, a lot of goals here on this road trip as well. And Danilo also wanted us to give a shout out to all the Brazilian fans out there that follow the Ducks. So we say hi to you. There's a lot of people that follow the Ducks. You'll be surprised. You think it's only Canada and the U.S.? No, there's other places. Europe, of course, too. But we've got Australia. We've got fans in Mexico, too. South America. There's fans around. So just give them a shout. And with that, we'll switch to another question. This one's going from Matt. He asks about Gibson, Eddie, and he wants to know, do we think he'll make the All-Star game this year?
Yeah, that's another tough one, I think. Because a lot of the times if it's due to the fan voting, they did a little bit better job last year, and guys who deserved to got in last year. We didn't see a John Scott situation, so it was good in that aspect. But they usually go on numbers, and unfortunately, right now, that's hurting John Gibson, especially because that 8-3 game just really killed his numbers. He had started pretty strong, but I think if it went off of his play and how he saves this team on a daily basis every time he's between the net, I think then he should go to the All-Star game. He's been one of the best goalies and one of the most valuable goalies to his team. But if you look at numbers, you've got guys like Quick, you've got Bobrovsky, you've got Bobrovsky and Quick, and you've got a lot of guys in front of him right now, numbers wise, who are better. Pekka Rinne's been very good, so it's tough. When only 6 guys, I believe, go to the All-Star game, it's tough to pick. If they do the same format this year, Pacific Division, Atlantic Division, Metro Division, Central Division, then maybe he has a chance, because I think he is one of the better goalies, if not second best right now in the Pacific Division when you look at how Jonathan Quick has started. But it's tough. Again, I hate repeating this, but it's early. We're only 11 games into the season. The All-Star game's at least a couple months away. So maybe if he continues to play the way he's playing and his numbers can reflect that, then I definitely think he has a chance.
Yeah, and speaking of the numbers, if you look at it right now, like you said, it's still early. He's 5-3-1. His goals against is 2.80, and his save percentage is .921. So, the numbers are not bad. They're good numbers, but like you said, there's other ones ahead of him. So, can he make it? Yeah, he could, but I don't know. I think if he has some more solid games, no more of these Florida type games, then I think he has an excellent chance. But only time will tell. Right now, I would say it would kind of be up in the air. Another question we had is Josh asked us about the Vegas and the Kings, which people have been talking to us about them, and how they've been playing hot for right now, and how do we think it'll kind of shape out? Especially with the Ducks dealing with the injuries, and we're gonna have to face these teams obviously several times coming up here. Actually, the Ducks are gonna be playing Vegas the next month here. It's an interesting situation because if you look at Vegas, they have some serious goalie problems, Eddie. They looked, all right. They had Dankst in there, and then he freaking gets hurt. Now, I don't know the goalie situation, but everybody looks at Vegas, and they're still 8-2, and they don't really seem to worry about that. But you and I talked about how we think they might cool off. As far as the Kings go, though, I don't see them cooling off anytime soon. Their defense is kind of back to the way it was in the Stanley Cup time. I mean, they're giving up less than 2 goals a game. They're the only team in the NHL doing that. So the Kings defense has been on point, and they're winning without Carter too. And I don't know. I mean, the Kings, I think, will keep playing well. I mean, that's just the way it is right now. In Vegas, I still think they're going to cool off a little bit. Eddie, what do you think about these two teams?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever really seen this in watching hockey, seeing a team's top 3 goalies all get hurt within the first 10 games of a season. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Fleury gets hurt early, then Malcolm Subban comes in and he gets hurt, and now tonight Oscar Dansk gets hurt, and they don't really have anybody else behind them. I think now they're definitely regretting trading Calvin Pickard. I don't think in any scenario they thought they would be without their top 3 goaltenders, but it's just insane. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do right now. Looking at the roster setup and who came in tonight, Maxim Lagacé looks to be now their starting goaltender unless they end up making a move for another goaltender. But yeah, even without these injuries, I think they were due for a cool down. But now with him being your starting goaltender, I think they're going to start coming back down to earth. I mean, it's been a great story. But I just don't see it. Theodore just got called up, so that's a big boost for them. But this whole Shipachev situation has been a nightmare. He was supposed to be one of their best players, if not their best, and now he's heading back to Russia. And James Neal started up unreal for this team, and now he's cooled down a bit. So I don't really see them continuing their success. I think in a couple months they're probably going to be maybe just because of their hot start in a wild card spot, but eventually I think they're going to fall out of playoff contention. But as for the Kings, I didn't think they would start this well. I thought they were still going to have issues scoring goals. They really didn't bring in anybody who impressed me that much. Camilleri, he's done okay for them so far, but I mean, they've had guys like Kempe, who's came up, and he's done unbelievable since he came up and has been playing for them. Kopitar has started very strong. Dustin Brown is playing like the Dustin Brown we saw 5 or 6 years ago, so he's been unbelievable playing on a line with Anze Kopitar. And then, of course, defensively, they're playing exactly like you said. They're playing like way back when they won the Stanley Cup. 2 goals a game. They end up losing tonight 3-2 to the Blues, but even that, they played a pretty solid game. So they're a scary team right now. And, they're sitting at 9-2-1, and there's a lot of ground for the Ducks to make up. And if they can continue to play like this, they're a serious threat, not only to win the Pacific Division, but to go far in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the Kings looked pretty strong. I mean, like you said, that was a team we thought they'd do decent, but I mean, yeah, they're looking good, and you got players like Brown coming back, from nowhere.
Coming back from the dead.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's a Halloween themed show, so there you go. I mean, that's the way it's been. I mean, it's kind of scary to see how they're playing right now. I mean, they're looking really good. So, but like we said, we don't. It's early. We don't care if they end up in first. If the Ducks can at least end up in second or third, I think we'll be good going into the playoffs. And obviously, it's a long, long way away. One more final question today. This one's kind of a good one. Lana asks us about the whole visor situation. She's wondering if maybe the Ducks GM Bob Murray would make the players, all wear them, just like the players have had those skate protectors on. If you noticed, you've seen them sometimes break from certain hits on the puck or come loose or whatnot. So she asked about that, and the league ended up putting in that visor rule just like they did the helmet rule way back in 1979, and now they put in the visor rule 2013. So basically everybody from that year, if they had played less than 26 games, they had to wear a visor. So there's still a handful of players. It looks like there's only about 30-something players out there that started this season that don't wear it, and obviously Getzlaf doesn't. But it's interesting to see if he would try and do that. I don't think he would, Eddie. Just basically the way the orientation works with wearing that and skating, it takes some getting used to and whatnot. I don't see Murray doing that. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't really see it, but correct me if I'm wrong. Did the Ducks not do something similar to that with skate guards in the past few seasons? I think
yes,
there was a team implemented saying they had to wear skate guards. So
yes.
Maybe because of that we see it. I don't think so, especially when majority of the players do wear a visor. You've got a guy who's been in the league for a long time like Brian Getzlaf who doesn't. I think the transition, it's hard for me to comment on this because I don't know the experience of playing with or without a visor, and playing without a visor so long, how it affects a player if he does end up playing with a visor. I think they're for me, at least looking from the outside, it would probably be a significant difference. And I think for Getzlaf to be mandatory to wear a visor would be, it would be hurting him more than, it sounds dumb because it'd be keeping him safer, but I think it'd be hurting his play more than helping it at this point. So I don't see them doing that. I think they'll probably ask him if he would consider wearing a visor, especially with this incident, but I don't see them mandating and saying you're going to have to wear a visor from now on. But we never know. We saw the skate guard thing, so it's possible.
Yeah, and if you remember in the playoffs a little while back, remember he had his face injured before, and he was wearing the full cage for a little bit. So if we learn something here between now and the Toronto game coming up, maybe he might have that on for a game or two. We'll see, depending on the extent of his injury. But if something like that happens, I would think it would only be for a couple games. So I think that's where you're at in that situation. And with that wraps up the fan questions. The Ducks have their homestand coming up here after that 4-game road trip. They come back. They're going to face the next 3 games this coming up week. They're going to play Toronto, Nashville, and then San Jose. The Nashville and San Jose games are back-to-back. Another scenario like that. So the Ducks have those 3 coming up. Toronto's been playing pretty good. Nashville's like the Ducks, just a little bit over 500, and San Jose's 500. So with these 3 games, I definitely think the Ducks could get points in at least 2 out of 3 of these games, Eddie. I think that they could do it. I think the big question is, obviously, if they're going to get Bieksa and Getzlaf back anytime this week. It sounds like Bieksa probably not, Getzlaf maybe, and also who they're going to start in net, Nashville and San Jose. Are they going to go Gibson and Miller or vice versa? So I think those are some of the questions that are going to dictate it. But the way it looks right now, I think the Ducks, I think they could get at least 4 points out of these 3 games this week.
Yeah, and it's definitely a tougher week than the last week. I think the only tough game looking on the outside was Tampa Bay last week, and obviously that didn't end up being the case. Florida was the tough game, but this is 3 teams who are very good. San Jose and Nashville started off a bit shaky, but they've started to turn things around, and Toronto's a little bit of the opposite. They started out on fire, and they've lost their last 2 games. So I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think a key is to see who's going to start for Toronto in the game on Wednesday, because they have a back-to-back. They play the Ducks on Wednesday, and they play the Kings on Thursday. And you would think that we would see Freddie against the Kings because they are the better team. They're 9-2-1. Usually you would see their starting goaltender against the better team. So I think that would be an advantage for the Ducks, because the backup for Toronto is either Curtis McElhinney or Calvin Pickard, whoever they decide to start for that game. So that will be interesting to see who goes there. But it's a tough team, a very young team. Austin Matthews is already one of the top 20 players in the league. So it's going to be a tough matchup for the Ducks, and hopefully Getzlaf can go in that game. I think that's going to be huge for the Ducks. If he can't go, it's going to be very hard to match up against guys like Matthews and Marner and Nylander. And then you go into the game on Friday against Nashville, a rematch of last year in the playoffs. I think a lot of people are going to be amped up for that game. And of course, Johansson chirping Kessler again in the media I think it was a couple days ago. So
what is that? What is
I
that?
don't know. They have issues, and Kessler obviously is still under his skin somehow. Kessler's not even playing, and he's
get over it, dude.
So that will be an interesting game to see. I'm sure there's a lot of bad blood still between both teams from that series. So that will be an exciting game. And like you said, it'll be interesting to see who goes for what game. Their teams' records are pretty similar. We'll have either Miller in one and Gibson in the other one. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe we see Miller go on Friday because Gibson will most likely play on Wednesday. You never know. But they're going to be tough games, especially on what I like to call probably a half back-to-back, considering the travel really isn't that far. The Ducks are playing at home on Friday and then traveling to San Jose on Saturday. So it's not like there's a bunch of travel involved, but it is going to be tiring playing a grinding game against Nashville. So if they can come out of this week with, like you said, 4 of 6 points, I think it's a success. But they're going to be tough games.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all going to depend on if Getzlaf comes back. Like you said, playing Nashville again, of course, that's going to already have, some bad feelings there. I mean, I don't know why Johansson's talking trash to Kessler, who's not even playing. I don't know what his problem is. I mean, we saw how well it worked out for him last playoffs, I don't know. That stuff just is beyond me. I just don't get it. Just shut up and play the game. That's all I got to say about that. And that's what I would tell Johansson. So we'll see what happens on Friday. Hopefully the Ducks can, take it to him and make him, basically be quiet. So, and then of course the Sharks, that's going to be another rivalry game. And then the following week, the Ducks then play the Kings. So you got some good games coming up here. You're going to have some tough, battles. Like you said, if, Freddie doesn't play the Kings, then he'll play the Ducks, so you may see some of that on Wednesday, and of course that he's going to be amped for that if he does in fact go in that game. We don't know yet, so some things to look for in the upcoming week here. The big thing, of course, is Getzlaf and Bjexen, how they're going to be, if they're going to be ready anytime soon or not. So that's a huge factor in how the Ducks are going to do this week, but. Like we talked about, kind of the theme has been, the bottom six has been playing well. We've seen the power play start picking it up. The Ducks did have, if you pick trick or treat, they got tricked in the game against Florida, but they got a treat in the game against Tampa Bay. So kind of the opposite of what you and I thought there, but if they can play like they've been playing, I like their chances. So you have to be happy too, Eddie. If you look in the month of October, with all the craziness that has gone on in that month, with all the injuries and all the people coming in and out and the call-ups and all this, just everything, the Ducks ended up 6-4-1. And you and I said, if they ended up 500, we'd be happy. And here they are, 2 games over. So I'm happy with the way the Ducks have gone for the first month of the season, especially with the way they played in October in recent years.
Yeah, and like I said, when you consider the guys who have been out of the lineup and guys who were healthy and now are hurt, and Fowler and now Eves as well, it's been a roller coaster. And for them to overcome that and like you said, be over 500, it's kind of more than we expected. So, I'm impressed with the way they're playing, especially as of late. I think those last 2 games were solid, other than the second period and overtime against the Hurricanes, which is tough. It is a back-to-back. So, I think if they can continue that play into this week, they have a very good chance of winning these games. And then we'll go from there. I mean, there are some important games early on. You're playing San Jose, and then you've got the Kings, and then you've got Vancouver. And so 3 straight games where you're playing some of the teams that are topping the Pacific right now. So, we talked about it multiple times last year. These games are always important, even this early on. They're 4-point games. So it's going to be a major step for the Ducks to step up and win those games.
Yeah, and this month of November is going to be big. Coming up here, the Ducks are going to have a lot of home games. They got 9 home games in this stretch here. So if the Ducks can come out this month and be a couple games up still, this is going to look good. So, with that, we'll be back probably in a week after these games somewhere. Obviously they have San Jose in here, but they got this big homestand coming up. So we'll be back somewhere in the middle here. We'll talk about more of the games. Want to wish everybody a happy Halloween, hopefully a safe holiday for you and your kids. And we'll be back, and let's go Ducks.